Roy, don't tell it. Just repeat to you. You're the chair. Come on, you're the chair.
Just recording the item.
Here we go.
Friends, good evening. I hope you'll be able to hear us. This way we're all equal. I didn't want to use literally, if you've ever done stage managing, the voice of God microphone. I thought it'd be typecasting. It was an honor, of course, to accompany my friends, our leaders, to Israel. And I want to say on behalf of all of us how grateful we are that you took the time and saw it as part of your duty to stand witness and to show solidarity and compassion and understanding with the people of Israel, to learn more, to have facts on the ground with which to share them. What I don't want us to do is amplify the headlines that we all are paying attention to incessantly, but of course we have to understand, and we all do, we're a self-select group of people who pay attention especially to these issues. I don't want us to amplify the things we could read in newspapers. I want us to talk about the things that we experienced, we came away with, and we don't have a lot of time. I think I would blessed to have a lot of you here. So what I thought we could do is I would only frame for a second from my perspective, and then hand it one at a time and ask us to be as brief as we can, but as deep as we can, as immediately as possible. Meaning, we are a group that is so vulnerable about this stuff that we are all in the spirit that is pained together. So the question is, what was meaningful for you about this? Why did you find it important enough to dedicate time as an elected official to do this? And what do you think even we who are paying a lot of attention, need to know that you came away with? Because I wouldn't presume, even with self-select leaders, that if you haven't stood at Kfar Aza the way we have, and I just be very blunt about it, if you haven't smelled Kfar Aza the way that we have, it's not the same experience from the distance. And I bless you for having the space. But there are times when we are called to remember what civil rights leader Brian Stevenson says: proximity is power. Testimony when you're right there is different, and we were right there too. So what I'd like to do is only say that as rabbi, I've been to Israel a gabillion times, and will go a gabillion times, and my good and welfare is that my son is going with his summer camp friends from Camp Ramah as a volunteer for 2 weeks during his college winter break, to volunteer on farms in the south to help out. My daughter just decided she's going to Hebrew University in Jerusalem for this spring semester. That is my good. That is our welfare. And I came away with a deeper sense of urgency that my children understand too, for which I'm both grateful and incredibly sad. They understand the dire moment we're in, and they also understand the power of standing as a Jew in our homeland. So I know that that's an unfair way to hand it to elected officials, but I do want to say I was as new to this as anyone could have been. And I'd love to ask you to share, and we are so grateful that you went to experience this, what you walked away with, maybe a moment, maybe a feeling, and certainly something that your constituents, us, we need to hear. So it doesn't have to go one at a time, but you're right there, so I might put you on the spot.
Hi, everybody. Ellen Hendricks. I'm sorry. I'll try to project a little bit better.
Come close if you need to.
Maybe stand up.
Anyone want to come forward?
Oh, yeah. I don't want to make this.
Maybe you should stand up.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'll try to keep it this level. So, I am a councilwoman in the town of Greenberg. That's my husband. My maiden name is Greenberg, spelled differently. And I said this yesterday at the menorah lighting in the county executive's office. I grew up with very little upbringing in Judaism. My mother had an uneasy relationship with God. So how I felt. I felt like coming yesterday into this event that I was lost in the desert and I was coming home to my Jewish family. And I would say that's kind of how I felt in my trip going. That's my takeaway from going to Israel. What led up to it is, as I was listening to the radio on my way to work and hearing the stories of Grand Central Terminal being shut down, and Brooklyn Bridge being shut down, I said, oh my God, I really don't belong. I never felt that way before, even though my family had to move because of anti-Semitism, and I grew up on Long Island. So I went from feeling out of body that I don't belong here to finding my family. And there was no real moment other than the graciousness, not to talk about the bad, but the graciousness of all the Israelis whom we met, down to the parents of hostages, of young girls. Thank you, they said. Thank you for coming. And we feel badly for the Palestinians. They are hostages too. So that graciousness is so my experience of this community. So thank you.
I'm Margaret Cunzio. I'm a county legislator. I represent the areas of North Castle, Mount Pleasant, and now parts of Harrison. I first want to say thank you for the opportunity to go. It was by far life-changing for me. I feel like I'm on a mission. I feel like I have to share what I saw, and I've been going around speaking to different groups. I will be speaking at schools, universities, Rotary clubs, anybody that wants me to share. Last night I met with a group of women from different synagogues to speak with them about my experience. And I think the most poignant comment that I got from somebody else was, oh, you came back from Israel, you have an opinion. I said, no, I came back from Israel, I have an eyewitness account. So those are two very different things. I'm going to agree with the rabbi. What we saw, what we experienced was both heartbreaking, inspirational, all at the same time. There were so many emotions in this short period of time. I think the hardest part for me was touring Kibbutz Varaza and meeting with family members of hostages. I can't even imagine what family members are going through that have no idea whether their family members are alive, dead. There's no closure. And what we're dealing with here is psychological warfare, terrorism, and irrational people. And it's very difficult to sit there and say you can negotiate with someone that's irrational. I feel like I'm on a mission. I feel like I've been given a gift, and that gift is to share what I have experienced with others and to let them see that things are not always what they seem. We also seem to have a very big issue with the younger generation, because where they get their information from, where they get their news from, is not what is reality. We're not teaching history. We're not really teaching what happened. We kind of stopped. We met with the directors of at Yad Vashem, and they were talking about teaching in the universities and colleges. And I said to them, I said, we have to take a step back. We have to go to K-12. We have to start going back and teaching world history, because we kind of stopped somewhere at World War II. But the reality of the situation after World War II and beyond is really what's affecting us today. And a lot of the kids do not have that knowledge base. And I'm an educator myself. I was a former classroom teacher. I teach at Iona University as a faculty member in the education department. I have a meeting Monday with Campus Ministries Director to have a panel there and speak to students, because I feel that it's important. We all have eyewitness accounts, and that's what we need to share, and we need to get that message out. What floored me was coming back from this trip and listening, because I'm not a big news person, but actually turning on the news and listening to it. And it wasn't what I heard, it's what I didn't hear. It's what wasn't reported. It's the fact that after that bus shooting, nobody in the United States had any idea about it unless they were following it for like 48 hours later. It was just kind of brushed under. And I think that's what we need to change. And when I hear some of the comments about, oh, Israel's losing support, Israel doesn't have this, we need to have people have an eyewitness account. We need to really educate, and I think education is the key. And it pains me to hear a lot of the rhetoric, and it pains me to hear people taking what they think is information when it may not be accurate and sharing it with their children or sharing it with their friends. And I think that, again, we've all been given this gift of this trip, and as elected officials, we can do one of two things. We can take that and we can run with it, and we can speak about it, and we can try to educate, or we could just sit back and wave. And I'm a doer, so I'm on a mission to speak. So I've never met a conversation I didn't like, so if you need me to speak anywhere, let me know, and I'll be right there with you.
I am Vidak Gashi. I serve as chair of the Board of Legislators. Margaret didn't mention it, and obviously this is a nonpartisan environment, but Margaret is a conservative among overwhelmingly Democratic crowd. I have never known her to be quiet. I promise you, she means it. I guess to attack the question directly, or as best I can, I feel like I cheated a little bit. I traveled to Israel once before to visit friends. That informed what I expected, what I was to see. And also we had a pretty good briefing, and Rabbi Creditor told us that we would be changed, that we would be struck by this. And I think I was a little cynical. I thought, maybe. And just a little bit of context for me personally, I come from Kosovo, and I am Muslim. And I've been around wartime environments, and maybe can be a little cynical about the sort of impact that it could have. I think I'll say that, like Margaret, and I'm sure the rest of us are going to attest, the amount of gratitude, the amount of times that I've been thanked there and here was remarkable. And it was always funny to me because it was an honor to be invited, an honor to go. And I think somebody, but not everybody was gracious. As a Muslim, I have some people who reached out to me and were very angry that I would go, and were difficult about the whole thing. Somebody kind of cynically said, now that you've gone, what do they want from you? What do they expect? And I said, I think they expected me to see what it was like when I got there for myself. And we did. And secondarily, speaking to the people on the ground, having been there once before and being there again, noticing how different of an environment it was now from then. It felt like a different country. And it's clearly a population that has undergone trauma and is hurting. And very often we were told, while they were thanking us, that they felt alone, and thanking us for going there as symbols of our friendship, obviously the solidarity, again, a profound honor to be there, to provide that solidarity. I just, very briefly, I just lost a friend Friday last week, and I was out of town. I was in Charleston, and when I came back, We landed, and the first thing I did was I drove to my friend's parents' house. And I met and I sat with the parents. Not because they needed me there, but I needed to be there. And I think like we did in that individual setting, I felt like Israel needs people to see it, to witness it, to have that solidarity and friendship. And just, and maybe to end it, I would say the times where, because trauma and because this horrific, barbaric terrorist attack is so bad, we have a way of abstracting it, making it separate and different and somehow foreign. And the moments for me that were most jarring were the ones where you forced not to do that. When we came in, you see the faces of the kidnapped, and they're different faces, men, women, young, old, clean shaven, not, and different countries. Hard not to identify with one of them at some point. When we went to Kfar Aza, oh, by the way, when people would thank me, I would say, I'm part of a delegation. We're gonna stay in a nice hotel in Jerusalem. I'm sure we're fine. And then I saw the itinerary, and it had Kfar Aza, and the Gaza, and I was like, well, maybe not so fine. And I had a little bit, well, let's still be safe, right? And they said yes. And when we pulled in, one of the first things I noticed was a sign for a local politician. I have a photo, and that local politician, I had just had an election. This past November, I had an election, and I saw it, identified it very clearly. That individual was meant to have an election on October 30th, I think I was told, or 31st, and was killed during that attack. Hard, and yeah, the smell, the sights, some of which were familiar, the bullet holes on walls and the clear indications of not just happenstance, clearly going after civilians with that purpose. But again, you abstract, and I think the last one that was, it's so weird to say it was meaningful because so much of it was meaningful, but it was a dog bowl. I think it was a dog water bowl with a bullet hole gone through it. And just you can't abstract that. It was incredibly hard. The resilience, the power were remarkable, and again, an honor to be there. Yeah, thank you.
I am Justin Brash. I am a councilman in White Plains. I am currently the president of the White Plains Council. I guess the only thing that I could say that's different for me than anybody is I'm the only Orthodox elected official in Westchester, so I have a lot of responsibilities and like all of you, trying to help the community and trying to help the broader community. I want to thank the council, of course, for this opportunity to travel and to bear witness. To say it was a difficult trip is an understatement. It was very rushed. We did a million things. We even went to the Kotel, the Western Wall, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I mean, we saw a lot of things. We met with Minister Yair Lapid, the head of the opposition, who was a prime minister. And to show you how well he was prepped, he turned to George Latimer across the table and he said, "You've never lost an election." So we definitely had some very happy and some very good moments. I'm going to share some different things from a different perspective. There was a lot of unity, but because my Hebrew is adequate at best, I saw certain things that others didn't see. The LED sign, of course you could see the flags, and there's a tremendous sense of unity, and in and of itself, that's very inspiring. But I almost cried when you drive down the highway and all the LED signs on the highway which say, turn this way, turn that way, this road is closed, they all say, B'yachad nenetzach, together we will be victorious. So everywhere you go, there are signs that we're going to be victorious by working together and being together. And it was, of course, very inspiring to see how together the country was. Obviously, we saw a lot of pain. I think that there are two stories that I want to share with you just about the condition of Israelis feeling lonely. like my colleagues, people were extremely grateful to see us. You know, they're feeling very lonely. The country is extremely empty. For most of us that have traveled there before, which is I assume everyone in this room, it was actually Vidot who asked, why is it so empty? We had a great tour guide, and she actually only gave half the answer, and I didn't want to be a wise guy, which I'll do here and tell you the other half of the answer. But she said, of course, there's no tourism and there's very little business going on right now. But she failed to mention that there's another 300,000 people on the front lines, and of course, people that are home with their families are taking care of their families. So who's out on the roads and who's at the restaurants and who's doing things? Everybody's in survival mode and trying to take care of their families and friends and doing things. So we had a lot of very difficult experiences. One that was very hard for me is we visited with different injured soldiers at Hadassah Hospital. So I visited they of course kept us in small groups because these people are very badly injured. We saw a soldier, a very Orthodox soldier from a very different culture from those of us in the room, or the bulk of us. He was clearly either Yemenite or Iraq. He was very dark, and his philosophy on religion was very different than most of us trained in the Western world would think of. And I have never heard anyone in my life say, I was shot up so badly. He was in the bed, his arm all bandaged and whatever, and his leg looking dead in the bed. And he turned to us and he said, I was shot up so badly, and it was translated into English, but as I said, my Hebrew was adequate at best. And he said, I knew I was going to die, and I said the Shema. And I mean, how do you even respond to something like that? And shortly after that, his 3-year-old daughter ran into the room and gave him a hug. And it was an extremely difficult and painful moment. But, you know, then he told us the second part of the story, which is he was in the medevac helicopter, and he realized he was going to live. Now, I don't know what you would say if you were going to live. I might say, Baruch Hashem, thank God. I might say, I'm so grateful I'm going to live. I could feel it, I could see it. And he quoted from a dreidel. So you know how the dreidel says, Nes Gadol Haya Sham? He turned to us, and in Israel they say, I said, Nes Gadol Haya Po. A great miracle happened here. And I literally almost broke down crying right in the room. I mean, just his faith. The amazing thing about him is, I mean, he looked in pretty rough condition, and he told us that in 6 months he's supposed to have pretty much a full recovery. So, thank God.
He's going back?
Yeah, I mean, you know, he was really a very inspiring person from a very different culture from ours, with his family, and you know, and one thing that everybody needs to know is these guys all feel terrible that they're in this situation. Sometimes you read in the press these terrible stories about retribution and anger. This guy felt he had a sense of honor and duty to defend his country and his family. Where else are they going to go? You all know the quote from Golda Meir. We have a secret weapon. We have nowhere else to go. That's what this young man was all about with his family, and that was very difficult. The other moment that I want to share with you, and there were many moments, was we took a tour of Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial, and it was empty. And the woman who gave us the tour said she's given these tours for, I think it was 15 or 20 years, a woman in her 60s, and she spoke about how her parents her parents were survivors and lost 35 cousins, grandparents, the whole story. And she's taking us around, and she's explaining, and she says, this is my first tour since the war because it's so empty and there's nobody here. And of course she was so happy, everybody was so happy to see us, bringing, thanks to all of you, a little bit of solidarity. And she broke down crying at one point. And she was so embarrassed because she was feeling so vulnerable and so much pain. And I have to say, you know, she was so embarrassed and it was so difficult. But I have to say, sometimes people know what to do. And our own Ellen Hendricks was amazing, went over and gave her a hug and really supported her. So I've never been able to thank, I've given a few lectures about this. I want to thank Ellen for having the right instincts and doing the right thing. But, you know, it was difficult, and that's all there is to it. Generally, my conclusion is the good news is that Israel is unified. The good news is everybody knows what they're fighting for and why they're fighting for and the survival of our democracy. The bad news is that the world is making Israel out to be a bunch of monsters, But I know what our responsibility is. Our responsibility is to fight and to be strong. I said in my synagogue on the Shabbat right after, it's an information war. And every single one of us, and I know you're all activists, has a responsibility to tell the truth about how Israel didn't solicit this war. They brought it upon them. And Hamas has said straight out, this is a rehearsal. They've said since the war. They've said we're going to keep doing it. So please tell the world. I'll stop talking. I don't want to talk your ears off. We have many better speakers than me who are coming up after me. So thank you for sending us, and thank you for this opportunity.
So, first I also want to thank you. Thank you for organizing the trip. Thank you for turning it into a solidarity mission when the educational mission was clearly not going to happen. It, like probably everyone here, everyone who's Jewish, when the war broke out, I wanted to go. I wanted to be there. I wanted to do something. I wanted, having been to Israel so many times, my granddaughter's a Sabra, my daughter had lived there for 7 years, and so I have been to Israel so many times, and I just wanted to be there. And this gave me that opportunity. And I'm just so grateful. When we did get there, I think there's 3 Jews, right? Oh, 4, counting the rabbi. 5 counting Bill.
He counts.
Among the electeds, we were also had 5 that were not Jewish. And watching and seeing it through their eyes was very impactful. And even watching it and seeing it through Ellen's eyes, it was like a newfound experience for her, which was also so meaningful. So part of what you've given us a gift is each other. And that bond and what we've been through together is long lasting and will have positive impacts politically and community relations wise for a long time. So because I went with the spirit of wanting to do something, I'll tell you what I did, because you've already heard so much of what we experienced. One of the experiences that we had was visiting really the hostage Central, right. It was they took over a building, and it was where families went, where hostages after they returned went, where the legal counseling was, where the advocates were. Everything was in this place. And when we got there, they said, oh, there's about to be a press conference. Maybe you'll listen, and then you'll meet the families. So we all go into the auditorium, and the press conference there were about 8 young women talking about their family members who were also young women. And we stayed for about 2 or 3 of them. I actually have a recording of one. And the message was, where's the international community? Where are the women? And although there had been reports of sexual abuse, the depth of the attacks sexually on women from age 3 to age 83 were much less known, even when we were there. The UN conference really brought that home. And so I said, this is something I can do. It gave me that thing I could do. And I had to do it right away. I mean, we were in the George and the rabbi and I we let the others go because George and I had a Channel 12 interview, and we were going to do it on my iPad. So we stayed. So I couldn't, I'm calling New York City Now. I'm calling, all of the sexual abuse, not Jewish organizations as we're driving along. And I would say by the time I left Israel, we had a statement, We had Governor Hochul on it, Andre Stewart Cousins, Carl Hastie, about 30 assembly members, 30 senators, Gloria Steinem, and a bunch of stars, you know, that I never heard of because everybody was reaching out. Mimi Roca got involved. It was, so I felt it gave me something to do. And I don't know what good that statement ultimately is going to do, except that it made all of the people who signed it recognize the sexual abuse that happened. You know, I stayed 4 days after everyone else. I was the lost and found, along with Bill. Everybody lost something, right?
My jean jacket.
Right. So I stayed the latest, and I recovered a lot with Belle. We recovered everybody's sweaters and whatever. But I also had met people on the trip, and I found myself unable to stop because it was so impactful, as I said. So we met when we were at the kibbutz, a young man who was a colonel in the Air Force. And he invited us as a group to come to the Air Force Base. Well, everyone left, so I went, you know. So I went all by myself to this Air Force Base where I met, and he, you know, I have pictures I'm not allowed to show anybody. You know, the drones, they took pictures of me in the, you know, with uniform on. It was, you know, I met all of the young people, you know, and to speak about their families. I mean, I met the head of the base, a woman who's 32 years old, whose 2 children, 2 and 4, and husband had to leave the base. She's a professional soldier. Why? Because it's unsafe. You know, bases are targets. And she might not see her 2 and 4-year-old for a year. You know, she'll see them maybe once a month for a couple of hours for a year. That's what they're envisioning. That's the sacrifice. So the resilience, the willingness to put yourself aside. Her mother had to left her job to take care of her kids. You know what we felt, and what I felt so proud of, you know, as a Jew and as someone who feels very close to Israel, is they are remarkable people, and I didn't want to leave. You know, that's what I felt when I got on that airplane. I didn't want to leave, and so it'll never leave me. And what I will do here is going to continue to be an outgrowth of that experience. And again, I just want to say how grateful I am and how important this trip was for all of us. And we will all take that experience forward.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry for my tardiness. Holiday season, so a lot of stops to be made. I'm legislator Woodson Samuels, majority whip of the county board, representing the city of Mount Vernon. I'm not Jewish, but you know, I have many friends who are, and admittedly, I didn't know much of the, you know, to Margaret's point, you know, the historical context as intimately as I should have. And when I was presented with this opportunity to go to Israel, I've never been. You know, I'm a kid from the south side of Mount Vernon, grew up in public housing. I thought this is an opportunity to become a better leader, right? The wise man once said, the only thing I do know is that I don't know everything. And it was alluded to before, but I'm a millennial, and a lot of folks in my generation, especially following this trip, I know now are completely misinformed, unfortunately. You know, the proliferation of memes and social media, you know, a lot of bad information gets spread on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And I find myself, following this trip, converting from a legislator to an educator. I'm pushing back on some of this misinformation that I'm hearing in conversation I find myself not engaging in debates, but if I see a friend posting something on their story, like, hey, did you know that Israel only supplies 12% of the electricity to the Strip? So maybe we should be holding other people accountable for some of the living standards that some of the Palestinians are living. And so, this trip for me was heavy. My mother, my girlfriend, they were very upset. They're like, why are you going again? This is a war zone. And I came back and showed them the pictures and the bulletproof vest. It was just like that really intrigued them. But just back to the theme of being an educator. Since I've been back, I've been, like I said before, going to events all throughout the community. People of all walks of life. They're like, hey, I know you went over there. How was it? And going to the kibbutz that was attacked on October 7th. I mean, to be there and to walk that community, it's unreal. It's hard to articulate and put into words. We to Amy's point, we went to the center where the folks are doing God's work, to bring the hostages back. And I remember one gentleman spoke about his 85-year-old grandmother being wrapped in a carpet, rolled in a carpet, and driven over the border under the toe of someone's arm on a motorcycle. I mean, I love my grandmother. I'm sure you all do, right? So, the fact that he was strong enough to sit there and tell his story, I truly salute him. I salute everyone we came across. Our chair Vidat mentioned that we stayed in a pretty nice hotel. I think it was, I acquiesced at that point. But coming down the elevator the first morning, I actually ran into a woman. She saw my pen. She saw I had a suit on. And she's like, hey, are you an elected official? And I'm like, yes, ma'am. She's like, are you from United States? I said, yes, I'm from New York. I'm here on a delegation on a solidarity mission. I'm here to learn. I'm here to listen. And I just remember, and I'll never forget, the look in her eye. She looked worried. Like, the theme we keep hearing is that our Jewish friends feel alone. They feel like no one has their back. And I really feel as though, and I'm sure Yadira can attest to this, that us who are not Jewish, especially in this time when my friends are saying this is their 9/11, it's very important and vital for us to stand side by side with them. I had the opportunity to work for Congressman Elliot Engel for 5 years before getting elected. And again, I represent Mount Vernon, the predominantly black community. When we have issues, my Jewish friends come out and are side by side with me when we go through our issues. And so it's only right to walk that walk and return that respect and that appreciation back to our friends. So I want to thank the council, I want to thank Rabbi, and I want to thank all of my colleagues in government for sharing in this extremely special trip and experience with me. And I'm so happy to be here with you all tonight.
It's hard to follow my fabulous colleagues, and I will apologize for being late, but my trip mates are probably like, of course she's late. I was super late the second day of the trip. So now for the rest of my life, I better be 10 minutes early. So I do apologize for my tardiness. I really do want to open from the very bottom of my heart, and I still wanted to make sure I make it here. I said I wanted to at least make sure I said thank you. Just genuinely thank you. You have options with what you do with your resources, and you can spend them in a myriad of ways, especially post October 7th. But the opportunity to be on this trip and to see firsthand and to learn, and as Amy noted, I think Westchester is better governed as a result of our friendship and relationships and just ease of being around. I saw Justin and Ellen a few days after at another event, and it was immediately like a squeal and a hug. I think you were there too, right? We were all like, and Vidat and I has already made fun of me 3 times about being late, and we kind of commiserated over, but the conversations are lighthearted and easy, and he's the chair, she's my state assemblywoman, and just being able to kind of get ideas We got to know Justin's daughters who grew up in White Plains and are now in Israel. So there was a lot of bonding that in a profession that can feel a little transactional, to have a deep relationship and a true experience. So I really can't underestimate that you not only shared an opportunity with me, but I think Westchester will be better because of your generosity. So I want to say that from the very beginning. I am still processing this trip quite a bit. I'm not sure if I'm not going to cry tonight. I've had a therapy session since, but it's still weighing very heavy on my heart. I grew up Catholic. I'm now a Methodist. I'm hardcore Catholic, like altar girl, all of the things. But I grew up in Queens, so we grew up near an Orthodox synagogue. So it's not that I haven't, and obviously, maybe you don't know, I live in New Rochelle, and January 1st I'll have the privilege of being its mayor. Yes, I forget. I'm still like Juju's mom, TJ's mom, Jeff's wife, and then all the other titles. Coming off of it was a very tough campaign, right? Elements of it were difficult, but immediately I had the sense that the Jewish constituents, my friends and neighbors, really wanted to understand where I stood in terms of support of Israel. Obviously, October 7th elevated that and heightened that. And when presented with the trip, when the fabulous Bill called and said, hey, we have a slot. This was before the 7th. I think it was the 5th, honestly, the 4th or the 5th. And I called my husband, and he was, at that time, what was life like before the 7th? And I can say that I'm not Jewish or Israeli, but I certainly feel like at that as a demarcation in my life. The big concern was who's going to get the kids to school. So I called my mom, and my mom stepped in. And then the 7th happened. Our passports were due that Sunday. I still submitted it. Monday I thought we were going. Wednesday we weren't going. And then it kind of went back and forth. But when we were going to go, to Tyree's point, my mom and husband were like, what are you doing? My husband never says no. He's the biggest supporter I ever had. But he was like, babe, I know you're all in, but this might be a smidge much for the family. My mom asked me to get extra life insurance, to bring a Bible and a rosary. My kids were not happy. So why did I go, right? I felt I owed it to my neighbors and my friends. I don't even want to say constituents. If I'm going to be mayor of a city that's diverse and that has 6 synagogues, at a minimum, I gotta be boots on the ground if possible and learn what I can learn from my own eyes and try to understand more about what my friends and my neighbors, as Tyree was saying, what we're feeling. And it was a lot. It was a lot. I'm also an administrator at a school that shall not be named. And so I have been on, student facing with a lot of issues, and I learned a lot that made me wish I could go back to October 9th, that Monday. I had a Jewish student, I remember him telling me that it hurt him that by that Monday there were these statements being signed by student groups that he considered friends. And I didn't really understand what that meant until I went to Kibbutz Farasa. And see, I told you, because I'm still working on this. What we saw there is not acceptable. It's the depravity of it. And I keep going back to this juxtaposition of seeing these fruit trees that are no longer being tended to, this life, these beautifully planted citrus trees and avocado trees, and toys. I'm a mother, so I do everything from the lens of a mother. College, law school, it doesn't matter. I'm a mom. And toys, some of them that were burned, some of them were not. The bullet holes and the burns, I wanted to go back in time, I just wanted to go back in time and say, no, this is not that. This is not that. And our students don't deserve that anger that was on campus on that Monday. And that's like, you can't go back in time. In hindsight, it's 2020, but I keep going back like, I wish I would have seen some of these things on that Monday. And what a better friend I could have been to some of my students on that Monday. I'm sorry. The museum was, I'm a history major, so seeing the exhibits and understanding the times that the Jewish community has been persecuted and sort of been left alone, I was like, where do I want to be in history? Where do I want to be? It was a question I asked. That day when we went to the museum, there were kids playing in the courtyard. Again, I'm a mom, I love it. And then the museum curator told us, those are displaced kids, and we're giving them the classrooms for 3 hours to have a little bit of normalcy. And I thought of COVID, when I was begging for 3 hours just to have a second to process and to give my kids a little bit of air, and what that must feel like for people who had this agriculture, this beautiful farmland, again, going back to the kibbutz and being stuck in hotels, as we heard was happening for many families. I think seeing the families of the hostages was intense, the intersectionality with women and sexual violence. Proud feminist, obviously, as a woman, and knowing that that's a tool of war, right? That we know what they're doing, we know what that does. And hearing Karina's family, we got to hear her mom, her dad, and her sister, right? The mom and dad in the back room, and her sister spoke on the stage that Amy described. And Lipschitz was the name of the grandpa, the grandpa is still there, the grandma was released, the grandpa's hand was shot, and he's still there, and hearing him describe the tunnels and the dampness. So combining the news with what we had heard in real life, I think, again, adding just a real texture and dimension to this, and also getting to know some of the news sources a little bit better. So now I check Times of Israel, I-24, like I just see it, I just try to expand my scope of reference and knowledge so that I can be just more aware of what's going on. The next morning, Rabbi and I were at Customs, and there was a shooting in Jerusalem, and Rabbi said we drove past that, so by the grace of God, we were spared that, but understanding that this wasn't over, even in that time of the ceasefire. So, at my day job that will not be named, there was a protest against me for going. I wasn't there, but pictures that were posted, not even on my page, were mocked up on I was called a Dini Deer's field trip, and I've been criticized, and I'm leaving a job of 10 years that I loved, and I'm trying to remember the 9 years and 9 months that were wonderful on a really sour note, and that's been very hard to process. That going to learn and educate, and that you can't live in a duality, that you can learn and be a strong supportive ally to your friends and your neighbors, and mourn the Palestinian casualties, the civilians that are dying in this crisis, and be sad when you see those images, and that we can't have that duality, and not live in both sides. Like life is either or, like all of us are just one thing, right? And that we can't say maybe mistakes were made in those early days in terms of what was happening here, and still mourn the loss of innocent people. So it's a lot, it is a lot, but again, from the very bottom of my heart, I am so grateful to have had the chance to go. Again, you could have done anything with that money, you could have said no. I think I will be a better mayor for my city because of this trip. I think I will be able to connect. I love the rabbi, I genuinely do, and having him, he always anchored us after every kind of part of the trip. He rooted it in scripture, or the human piece of it, not the just like next stop on this trip is, but just really rooting it. Even the demonstration of the picture at Yad Vashem of the Jews portrayed as meek, and then the Jews portrayed as powerful as a result of Poland, the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, while they weren't successful, the powerful. So I'm grateful the way exactly it was coordinated. Tali is fabulous. We still had Elliot with us in the WhatsApp, and obviously, Bill, how wonderful he is. So there were so many layers of this that were just so inspiring. And again, thank you is not enough, but just know that it was investment that will pay dividends moving forward. Of that, I'm extremely confident. And I think New Rochelle is going to be better because of the opportunity, the 53 and a half hours that I had to be in Israel. So thank you very much.
My role theoretically was to moderate a panel, but we're blessed with an embarrassment of riches, by which I mean friends. So I'll say the last word in a second, but Margaret's going to say an additional word, and then I'll close. And I think that would be what we're able to do for now, and I'll ask you to thank them once we have those 2 moments.
So I had an interesting story, and Bill was aware of this, but I wanted to share it with you. Unlike Tyree and Yadira, my mother and I decided not to tell my father I was going. So he's been having some heart issues. He had to go in for this test. My mother's like, you know what, just don't tell him. As I am getting on the plane and tell him to come home, my mother texts me, and she goes, oh, by the way, your father saw you on TV. I'm like, oh, great. I was like, how did that go? She goes, he was fine with it. But the coolest thing about it was the aftermath of what my father told all of his friends. And I'm going to edit and give you the PG version. He sat there and he said, I am so proud of my daughter. She had more guts than I ever would going. And Yadira, you're going to be a better human for it. We're all better humans. I mean, people are proud of us for going. They thank us all the time. But to me, as a daughter, having my father say that and say how proud he is, and and like I said, that I had more guts than he did. That's pretty impressive. But Bill knew, and Bill's sitting there, and he's like, when are you going to tell your father? I'm like, we were on TV, so it was ready, and but yeah, so that was right before we took off to come back home. So a little lighter now.
Before we close it up, I just want to say, first of all, I want to thank everybody that came tonight. You have no idea how important this trip was to me personally and for the council as a whole. This is my third and final year as president of the council. Elliot and I have been talking about doing this sort of trip. Amy has been urging us to do something like this for years before I became president. And when the war came, and all of a sudden our educational trip with 14 or 15 elected officials was about to be canceled, we really were one of the first institutions that pivoted. Rather than cancel, it turned it into a solidarity mission. And I was a little bit scared. I asked the people that we had already promised something totally different. And for these 8 people, many of whom had never been to Israel before, to agree to go into a war zone is something extraordinary that we will never forget. I want to thank Rabbi Creditor for the incredible framing of every step that we took along the way. And I want to mention also, something mention was made already about the meeting with Yair Lapid. We met with President Herzog.
Yeah.
We met with the president of the country on the same day that he was meeting with 3 other delegations from countries. We were a county. And that's
You're the country of Westchester.
So honestly, I think this is a very, very special group. It would have been a special group if we weren't living through extraordinary times. But this is a group that I know will be in touch with one another, with their constituents, many of whom your community leaders, and take their stories that they've shared with you tonight and tell them to your friends, because to me, this is one of the shining moments of the West Preston Jewish Council.
I'll just close sharing with all of you what I shared with my friends at our closing dinner, which was a different kind of framing. We are blessed here in Westchester to have such a really rich and vibrant shared community, and the Jewish community is so beautiful. There's a lot of richness here that other communities really just don't have the depth and texture and interest. And even with all of that, and I don't really have to tell anyone this, terror is designed to make you feel isolated and alone. And I have, and I know I'm speaking not alone in the room, but have felt really alone and sad and separate, despite the fact that I'm so blessed to be in this community, in this county. And I felt so comforted by you. I felt so unbelievably comforted by each of us, and I'm saying each of you, bringing your hearts to this. Yadira and I were on the news together Sunday morning, and this is what it means to do the work of leading a Jewish community. It's to bring people together within and beyond the Jewish community who will just love each other, who will know that our shared humanity is calling us to do good together, and the stronger each part of our community can be, the more sincere our hugs truly are, the greater our shared society will be good neighbors. So I'm just going to use something you said about me too. We can't go back in time, but we can commit to being really good friends to each other. And I know that I speak for everyone when I say it just feels so beautiful to have you as friends. It's good to be your neighbors. It's good to look to you as our leaders. Thank you to the council for making this trip happen. Thank you to you all for being willing and brave to be part of this and bearing testimony in the way that we really need. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Happy
In the spirit of Hanukkah and gift giving on this last day, last day of Hanukkah, we have a book for you, Am Yisrael Chai, Essays, Poems, and Prayers, edited by your favorite rabbi, certainly you get it.
Yes.
Rabbi Menachem Federer.
Brilliant.
Who, is a scholar in residence, which is an amazing job at DJ Federation. So we can't call him that. I call him my spiritualist in residence, my best friend in residence, a rabbi in residence. So edited by Menachem.
Perfect.
Bill,
I want it signed.
Bill,
Oh, it is signed. All right.
That's a lot, isn't it?
Oh, I'm
This is going to have hung up in a kind of second.
I know, I want my name. I'll get you a pen.
I love this. So if you can just sign your name, but sign big.
What Elliot is giving everybody is the sign that was on the front of our bus, and asking each of them to sign it, so we have it as a keepsake. For those who don't know, Elliot was supposed to go like 4 hours before we took off. He had a kid and stuff.